Back on YouTube, we'll call the Reading meeting back to order, coming out of executive session at 7:46. I would ask Todd and John to declare the same, no action having been taken in the executive session.
Same for Region 9,
And
back
the
in
same-
order at 7:47.
And the same for Easton, back in order at 7:47.
Okay, thank you. And we will look at this time for any motions or action to be taken with respect to the Contractor Central Office Administrator's item or any other issues related thereto. Seeing no motions from across the board, we will consider item A closed and move to item B, Superintendent vacancy and formation of the Personnel Search Committee for the Superintendent. As I believe everybody is aware at this point, Dr. Harrison has tendered his resignation effective 9/23/21 pursuant to the terms of his contract and his 90-day notice period. And so at this time, it is incumbent upon the boards to discuss action for filling that forthcoming vacancy. Traditionally, it has been the process of the boards to form a personnel search committee, and within that, a personnel search steering committee to do the heavy lifting of the work. As a practical matter, at this time last year, when we had this conversation, the boards agreed to appoint or hire Dr. Joe Arardi to be a search consultant for the boards and entered into a contract with him. That contract requires that if the selected candidate does not work for the district for at least 24 months, the search is duplicated at no additional cost. So there will be no additional cost to the districts to having Dr. Arardi run the search again for us this year. I have had a preliminary conversation with Dr. Arardi to advise him of the situation, and he is prepared to move forward with the boards if that is the will of the three boards. I think at this point, we can either ask for any comments related specifically to the vacancy or a plan for going forward, or I can share for the edification of the boards the motion that was passed a year ago that established the joint committees as a starting point for how we might create a personnel search committee at this time.
You're going to show a motion, or we're going
I
to
think
make
that would be helpful, Chris.
I'm working on sharing now. So you are now looking at, because I'm not going to read this really quickly and make you understand it. This is the motion from the meeting minutes of May 26th, 2020. Is that large enough for everybody?
Yep, that's fine. Mm-hmm.
So
I'll make a motion to accept draft motion number 1.
But the motion
You wanna
was
do
an
them
omnibus
separately?
motion a year ago. It was a single motion last year.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was, okay, so then I'll make a motion to accept the motion as presented.
before we move on, sorry.
Let's see if there's a second first in
Okay.
Region 9, a motion having
So
been
second
made.
in Region 9, I can't see everybody, so if you can shout out.
I see
looks
Mary
like
Lee.
Mary Lee. Yep, thank you. Mary Lee is the second.
All right, the motion is on the floor in Region 9. Did you have a technical comment, John?
Yeah, here we say 2 members of each of these boards. I think I'm going to have 3 members as well as myself who are going to want to participate.
I was just going to
Cut
ask
2 and a half.
if we should expand it to 3 members from each board.
So at this point, we have a single motion for a single board and a requested amendment.
I remember why we didn't do that, because I asked about that before. And that was per the advice of Dr. Arardi for the mechanics of running a meeting. He wanted to keep a lid on the number.
And just for clarification, under these 2 motions, all board members are search committee members and can attend every meeting, including the steering committee meetings.
Absolutely. I did.
Correct.
I did last time, yeah.
For sort of the overall benefit, a personnel search committee is a creature of the FOI Act effectively, because it creates a body from which it can meet in non-meeting, not subject to notice and meeting requirements of the FOI Act. And it is limited to the personnel search for an executive level employee, which would be clearly covered by the office of the superintendent. So the boards have traditionally, and I think would intend to again, appoint themselves as a single 21-member personnel search committee so that they could have these conversations on a regular basis. However, the heavy lifting of a superintendent search is a heavy lift that requires the review of applications, deliberation on selection of interviewees, interviews, deliberation, and then ultimately a recommendation back to the personnel search committee. Members of the steering committee are expected to attend every minute of every meeting for the benefit of the applicants and for the process. Members of the search committee, who are not members of the steering committee, are traditionally allowed to observe any meeting of the steering committee so that they are apprised to the level which they're interested. And it is frequently the practice of the steering committees to allow for limited participation of those members to the extent that they have comments that are helpful for the process. I think that's a fair recitation. Heather and then Randy.
I want also for members of the public to know that another thing that Joe Arardi does is he holds focus groups with members of the school community to outline basic parameters of who they would want in a superintendent. So the views and values of the community are involved also.
Yep. He'll talk to staff. He'll do community things. He'll do parent things.
Parents, yeah.
Yep.
Randy.
I should remember this, but I just want everybody else to jog my memory. We brought 2 or 3 back to the entire committee for 3, John? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing was that we sort of set a parameter that if you were listening in on the interviews, that not that you weren't allowed to weigh in, of course, but that it was how do we work it so that it was like if you had only seen one of the interviews,
right?
It was like you couldn't really say like, oh, this is my favorite when you hadn't seen the other ones.
I was still allowed to provide feedback, but I had to explain that this was, I was able to see these 2 candidates instead of all of them. But Joe still listened to my, feedback.
Right.
As a practical matter, really the question is, what is the size and scope of the steering committee doing the heavy lift here? And it seems to be a question as to whether or not that will be 3 members of each board plus the chairs, or 2 members of each board plus the chairs ex officio. And that really comes down to whether or not all 3 boards have a bona fide interest amongst 3 members of doing that heavy lift.
Right.
I know, speaking for Reading, I've had 3 people step forward and, could meet that lift. It sounds like Region 9 might be in the same situation.
Is that true? If that's the case, then all 3 boards have 3.
Right. We might have just solved the problem.
Yeah, if that's the case, then we're good.
The downside, of course, is that we're into the summer. Scheduling becomes a nightmare, and everybody just has to be flexible and make this a priority. That's what it boils down to.
Right.
Are we able to do this via Zoom?
Yes, because they're non-meetings.
They're non-meetings.
But
Although I think the interview process will probably be in person.
we're
The
probably
other
going to want to
downside
meet
is
people.
that you're adding about 30 minutes onto each interview.
I was going to say to the downside that was mentioned before, a dozen of us involved,
Right.
The members plus the chairs, that seems like
It becomes a crowd real fast.
torn between more people and more time, efficiency.
But I think all of us have now worked with Dr. Arardi on multiple searches at this point, and he is efficient and is able to herd cats, and I wouldn't have a problem per se with it being additional people. Chris Hucker? Yeah. Your power's back.
But your sound is muted. You're muted. Muted.
We can see you, but can't hear you.
There we go. Eversource said it would come back on at 8 o'clock and it came back on at 7:50. So that's not bad. Anyway, I guess I agree that having a 12-person steering committee could work. I will tell you for historic context that the previous search committee was limited to only 6. So we've gone from 6 to 9 to 12. And people are really going to have to, be efficient here. I'm trying to say it nicely. 12 is an awful lot of people.
There's efficiency and there's confidentiality that are both critically important to this process.
Yep.
So from a
Wait, hold on. That said, I don't want anyone to feel like they're being excluded from the process.
Right. I agree.
Right, so we have a motion from Region 9, the
Right,
motion that's
there's a
currently
motion
there
from-
with 2.
right, there's a motion for Region 9 that has 2. What I thought I heard from Karen was an attempt to amend that to make it 3. We can either entertain it that way, or can go back to Mike to see whether he wants to stand by his motion or withdraw it at this time. Mike is going to stand pat, looking at his face.
Well, no. I first, I want all board members to know that I am not in favor of excluding anybody ever as a board member in these actions at all. The motion was in alignment with previous motions, and the size has always been restricted to kind of promote greater efficiency. But I'm certainly, if it's the wish of all the boards to expand the committee, I am not going to put up an objection. I just thought that, again, that keeping it the size it was and having communication between the boards would suffice, but I don't want anyone to feel excluded. So
I agree and see it both ways. And if there's a bona fide interest amongst 3 members of each board to roll up their sleeves and do the work,
fine, yes.
So will you withdraw the motion, Mike?
Yes, I will, or amend it to make 3. How's that?
So it sounds like Mike just withdrew his motion to make the same motion,
Withdraw.
but instead, let's see, we'll have 3 members. Now the question becomes how you have equal representation of 3 between the towns of Easton and Reading. I think in this case, if Todd is the chair from Easton, then it
That
suggests
becomes a
appointing
problem
2
in
meetings.
region.
Yes,
Yeah, it
we'll
becomes a
have
problem
that.
in Region 9 because we'll have representation from two or more from one town. So
2 from Reading, 1 from Easton with the chair.
Well,
Right,
with
but
the
if-
chair, it'll be 2 and 2.
Exactly. Just count the chair.
So this works if you count the chair, but not if you don't.
Do we care about, does party affiliation make any difference? I mean, do we want to be cognizant of balancing in that way as well? If
It
you
sounds
have-
like what
if you
we're
have-
doing now is taking everybody who's interested.
I think, well,
It's just like-
I know, but I think to Jenny's point, like we have that, like in Easton, we have various things in our bylaws that seek to do that, but we have to say to the degree practicable.
Mhm.
Because if 0 of party A says I'm interested and all of party B says I'm interested, well, that is what it is.
Right.
I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think
the
it's going
folks
to be
who-
the case at all.
The folks who raised their hand in Reading are 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat for what it's worth.
And I would assume that anyone who's interested would be interested in the best interest of the towns and the school.
Right.
I agree.
To be perfectly frank and candid, last year, it was people of both parties who
Right.
picked our candidate. So
Right.
everyone was pretty much in agreement. There was no political party
Yeah.
partisanship involved at all.
Yeah. And from
I'm not-
Easton, it's-
just to be clear, I'm not raising it because of anything internal. I just, given sort of the environment that we're all working in at the moment, I just think it would be wise if we were cognizant of that moving forward in the process.
Jenny, that's exactly why I
Perception
brought
and
up.
community.
That's exactly why I brought up that it was a bipartisan group last year who picked our candidate.
Yep.
Chaired by 2 Republicans.
And I think this, those raising their hand is the same outlook in Easton as in Reading. 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat.
Let's see. I'm going to take out from the model language the equal representation from the 2 towns because it becomes mathematically impossible the way this is phrased to have equal representation amongst 3.
Well, it still is actually, right? 3-3.
It is. It can be.
But it's okay. Take it out. It's fine.
Yeah.
You can't divide 9 in half. With 12 you can, but where it was in the sentence, it didn't make sense.
Right.
With this change, if we're wordsmithing this before anybody makes the motion, do we want to leave in the soliciting bids for search consultants, or do we want to take it on the expectation that we are using Dr. Arardi pursuant to his guarantee?
What was the cost of Dr. Arardi?
No, I would. I don't know that we want to release that publicly, but I would say this. I would be strongly in favor of continuing with Dr. Arardi under his previous commitments to perform the search under the terms of our original deal. And I thought that he did a fine job the last time, and I would be in favor of moving forward. So
he did a stellar job for us with the HKMS search as well.
that's just me. So I don't think we need the search consultant bids. I don't feel we need it, but that's a board.
I think the other side of the coin is you can leave it there and not exercise that right. And if the search committee meets and says, our process includes keeping Dr. Arardi, then you just don't need to exercise the option. But if the search committee meets and says, you know what, we really want to go out to bid, you can back the tri-board, we want to use D'Agostino and Associates, at least the authority is there.
Point well taken. That's fine. Maybe then.
Yeah, you can leave it. It says may use,
Yep.
so.
Right.
We're good.
All right, so does anybody want to make the as amended motion that we see on the screen?
Chris has a question. I don't know if you can
Chris
see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris Hocker does.
Chris Hawker?
That may have been his previous hand raise.
Yeah.
I can't tell. He's got.
No.
Yeah,
I did-
that was my previous hand raise, sorry.
Yep.
There you go.
Got it.
So did I make the motion in Region 9? I thought I made.
You need to redo it.
I think you just did.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion as presented.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Marilee, second. I think I can't see everybody.
Mhm. Do I have the same
Easton?
motion? Same motion in Easton?
Moved.
Thank you, Randy. Do I have a second? I may not be able to see.
Going once, going twice.
You can second it yourself, John.
Okay, I'll second it. Oh,
I
Jenny,
saw Jenny.
Jenny raised her hand. Yep.
Same motion in Reading.
So move for Reading.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second in Reading?
I'll second.
Thank you. I heard Heather, didn't see her. All right, any further discussion on this motion and any objection to me taking it down at this point? All right. If there's no further discussion, the motion having originated in Region 9, we'll ask Todd to call the question, please.
We'll call the question in Region 9. Cheryl,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Juliet,
Yes.
No.
Quinn. It's not joined. Karen,
Yes.
Marilee,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
and myself, yes, carries 7-0.
Good. In Easton, Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you, Randy.
Yes.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion passes 4-0.
Thank you, John. Calling the question in Reading, Heather,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yep.
Mike,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Steph. That's a yes. Chris Hawker?
Yes.
Thank you. I vote yes. Motion carries 7-0 in Reading. At this time, if the chairs are prepared to make appointments to the steering committee, we would entertain those in public session right now. For Reading, I would appoint Heather Whaley, John Riley, and Mike Hoffman as the 3 members of the steering committee.
In Easton, I would appoint Jeff Parker, Jenny Cheetah, and Devin Weibel.
And Region 9, I'm not ready since I wasn't an extra person.
And Todd, are you required to make appointments in public meetings?
Yes, we have a public meeting next week, so we can do it then.
Do you have 2 people you want to appoint, or do you want to wait on all 3?
I'll wait on all 3.
Any further discussion on the superintendent vacancy and formation of personnel search committee topic? All right, if there is not, at this time, we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is public comment. And as per usual, members of the public are asked to indicate their interest in speaking by using the raise hand feature in the reactions button on Zoom. Limit their comments to 2 minutes and to the educational program of Easton and Reading. Any members of the public wishing to be heard, please raise your hand using that tool at this time. I see Dana Benson.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harrison, for your service to the district.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Benson, if you can state your street.
Yeah, I always forget that part of it. Thank you.
Yep.
Dana Benson, 34 Pond Road, Easton. 34 Pond Road, Easton, Dana Benson. So I did want to thank you for your service to the district and wish you good luck on your next step. I want to go back to a question. We've been talking about the methodology, not the content or the idea of, but the methodology of the DEI surveys. We did send a letter to all your inboxes yesterday. Probably you haven't seen it, but we have about 56 or 60 citizens who are concerned and would ask you to patch that before you go forward with it to have data integrity. The second comment quickly is that we sent a letter to everybody today, which you probably haven't gotten, with about 40 signatures with some comments and suggestions about the criteria that some of us in the community feel would be appropriate to consider as you start the search for a new superintendent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana. Next, I see RJ Bolito.
Oh, you're on mute still. There you go.
Sorry, I always do that. Maureen Hanley, 21 Andrews Road. Just a personal comment. I moved to this town 4 years ago, just 4 years ago. I left Fairfield's school system after living there for 20 years for a new start with my children. To this town that was beautiful, safe, and had a great school system. I grew up in New Fairfield, and Easton just felt very much like that. I want to start off by saying that our experience at Samuel Staples was absolutely amazing. But I've become increasingly concerned as my daughter entered HKMS, as I have seen curriculum shared with me by other parents and some that I've experienced myself during her time at HKMS, and some of the Jill Barlow curriculum that I have seen, which really concerns me. And dealing with the declining scores in our town. As I weigh the very difficult decision to remove my 6th grader to private school, I ask all of you to carefully weigh your decision and process for a new superintendent, and that your focus is on education first and utmost. I would encourage, possibly, I understand, having been the president of boards and served on many boards over too many years that I'd like to remember, that maybe you might want to include parent representation from each of the school boards. I understand that gets a little hairy, but I think it would go a long way to add inclusiveness to our community that seems to be very divided right now. And I think if you were to add a parents' council.
If you could wrap up, you're over 2 minutes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, the last thing I want to say is that I just want to wish Dr. Harrison well in his new endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Ben Oxman.
Thank you. Ben Oxman, Longwell Road, Reading. Is that good enough, or you need the
That's
number?
good. That's good.
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and best of luck to Dr. Rydell on his future endeavors. I have a short 2-minute statement on my concerns for this new hire. My family and I recently moved to Reading from New York City. I'm a socially liberal person. I support a well thought out diversity and inclusion initiative that doesn't view the world through the lens of the oppressed and oppressor. I'm here to urge the board to vet candidates for ideological perspectives. I took the time to read Dr. Rydell's PhD thesis to try and understand where all this urgency is coming from. It wasn't comforting, especially the parts where he self-describes as a critical theorist. Here are some quotes. My leadership approach begins in critical theory and ends in social activism. Second quote, I am a critical theorist. It is very clear. This paper described the doctor's view of oppressed and oppressor in detail and bringing CRT to K-12 schools. It was really shocking. This is likely the most transparent case of DEI initiative being tied to CRT nationally. There's just no denying that CRT is the theory and DEI is the practice in this region. Identifying kids as oppressed and oppressor will lead to nothing but hate. Let's find a positive path forward for our children with nuance and humility. Let's find someone who will steer our kids away from the fringes of ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Next, I see Ann Minuski.
Good evening, Ann Minuski, 20 Morning Glory Drive, Easton. I wish Dr. Harrison well on his future endeavors. I too am concerned, as I have been for years, about the quality of education of our Easton and Reading children, so much so that we pulled our children out of the schools. So at this point, we are focusing on a new leader, and I am offering myself to be a part of any committee as a resident of the town of Easton to be on a search committee. And lastly, our children are off on vacation during the summertime. Summer school is kind of a ruse. The Rand Corporation and Johns Hopkins University created Summer Slide. So I'm hoping that parents will give their children the summer off. There is no requirements for summer reading, even though our school districts give reading lists and the libraries give reading lists. I would hope that parents in Easton and Reading will look at these books. This is a Reading and Easton book made by Dan Cruson, God love him. He just passed away. And this is called Aspetuck Chronicles. And this can be purchased at the Historical Society of Easton. So for our children to actually learn about where they live, true history of their towns, I would suggest these books. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. And next I see Robert Santangeli.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the board. Robert Santangeli, Honeysuckle Hill in Easton. Just a few comments on, I guess, the recent past and what I think we all hope for a new candidate. While we can't change what's happened the past year, I think it's important that we reflect on it and learn from it. I feel, certainly Mr. Harrison did not bring critical race theory to Easton, but I do think it was critical race theory that brought Mr. Harrison to us, especially based on his work and his thesis. And unfortunately with it, this ideology has brought division and quite a bit of conflict, as we've all, I think, witnessed. It's infected the public discourse and frightened, many of us in the community. This departure, I think, gives us an opportunity to come together, not just for individual ideologies or beliefs, but the good of our community and, of course, our children. I think this provides us an opportunity to find what unites us, to look at our shared values, like hard work, respectfulness, empathy, critical thinking. And it gives us an opportunity, again, to unite us under these same goals. I hope the board and the committee will work towards finding and ultimately selecting a candidate who represents these ideals and the ideals of all our community and not just the loudest few. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and excellent timing, right at 2 minutes. Any other public comment? I see Dana, you've already spoken for two minutes. If you have something very quickly, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thank you for giving me a second opportunity. I'll be very quick. I want to emphasize that in much of the public debate on Facebook, et cetera, the people who are bringing the DEI initiative to our schools are claiming that they're not teaching CRT and that these two ideas are disconnected and not connected. And I want to go on record as saying that CRT is the theory and DEI is one of the conclusions and practices that come out of it. These two are interrelated. Without the assumptions of critical race theory and social justice theory, we wouldn't be looking at the kind of DEI initiatives and the survey, which is the survey is quite upsetting to a lot of people. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Seeing no other hands raised, Todd and John, do you see anybody trying to otherwise get attention? I don't think so. That moves us on to item 4, which is board member comment. Why don't we go Easton, Reading, Region 9, starting in Easton?
Any comments from the Easton board?
Any comments from the Reading board?
I have a comment.
Heather.
I think that it is painfully obvious that we need to figure out what we have to do to end this 3-board structure. And we've talked about it for years, and it is untenable, unsustainable, and it's not good for our employees or our students. And so whatever needs to happen to make us unite as one school district needs to happen, and we need to take that seriously, and we need to do it now. And then beyond that, I want to apologize to Dr. Harrison for the way that he's been treated over the past year. To be perfectly clear, the DEI work was begun under Dr. McMorran, and it was voted on unanimously or by all 3 boards. I believe there was 1 abstention. And he did not come here pushing an agenda. He did not come here trying to push any politics. And quite frankly, I find it really disturbing that the idea of equity, and we talked about this in one of our recent meetings, that the idea of equity, giving each student whatever it is that they need to succeed, is somehow wrong or something we shouldn't be doing. And I think it's really kind of a perversion of that word to say that we shouldn't be striving for that. You know, we've all gotten the same emails. We've all gotten like multiple emails. And, you know, you can say, oh, this isn't coming from a place of racism. But when you sign your email, white lives matter, you kind of negate your whole point. Okay. And Dr. Harrison came here in good faith. He came to a district that was already wanting to undergo an equity audit that was long overdue, because even if you have 36, 52, however many people signing your letter, we had hundreds of current and former students saying that they had experienced bias and harassment or witnessed it in our schools. We would be negligent as board members to ignore that. And we didn't ignore that, right? We didn't. And so Dr. Harrison came to a district that was looking to do that work. And look at how he was treated. I'm disappointed, and I apologize.
Thank you, Heather. Other comment from Reading? Chris Hucker. You're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to suggest to both my fellow board members and the public that the decision of hiring the next superintendent should not and must not be made to revolve around a particular issue, a single issue or set of perhaps intertwined issues, one way or the other. Proponents of one school of thought and proponents of the opposite school of thought, this is not how I will participate in selecting the next superintendent. It is a far more complex and important decision to be made than to politicize it one way or the other.
Thank you, Chris. Other comments in Reading?
Colleen, I just want to assure, I'm on the Reading board, but I'm a parent and I'm a volunteer and I participate. There's several of us on the board that are parents, and our board is a cross section of the community. So there is representation of the community on the boards. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Colleen. Other comment in Reading?
I'd just like to echo too that I think that it's immediate and urgent that the boards work to consolidate in some manner, and even if that extends beyond the borders of Easton and Reading. The current model, we mentioned it a year ago, wasn't working. It's continuing to not work. We're continuing to face the same set of circumstances that we face and will likely face again in a year or 2 years, again, if we don't make substantive changes to our board structure. It's just unfair to require our administrators to commit the time to not just these board meetings, but the committee meetings and everything else that they need to do throughout their day in order to effectively govern and to lead our schools. And we're doing ourselves a huge disservice to continue kicking the can down the same way, just because it is difficult to reorganize and set our structure. And I know there's a lot of complex things that need to happen to make it happen, but we're just going in the wrong direction by continuing in the same direction. And I too would like to deeply thank Dr. Harrison for his commitment to our schools. And yeah, I'm going to miss him, and I wish him the very best. And thank you very much for all you've done for us.
Thank you, John. I think we're just left with Steph or Mike. Anything? All right. I would have a couple of comments that build a little bit on the others. First, there was a comment in the public comment with respect to some discourse with respect to DEI work on Facebook. The first thing to think about Facebook is that it's an awful representation of these communities. And it very frequently brings out the worst in all of us. And I will count myself amongst that from time to time. And we should not take Facebook banter or emails that are forwarded by a bunch of people to represent the will of the entirety of the community. And when somebody says that the proponents of DEI are on Facebook saying something, I guarantee you that's not true, because the proponents of DEI aren't sitting around on Facebook arguing the finer points of DEI. They're doing the work and trying to move this board forward and trying to do the work that the DEI task force was established to do in May of 2020, before the words Rydell Harrison were on anybody's mind. And it's extraordinarily frustrating to me when I keep getting emails from folks who tell me that Dr. Harrison was only here and this DEI only exists because of Dr. Harrison, because it's simply untrue. And it's unfair to him, and it's unfair to the work of these boards that began before Dr. Harrison was appointed. And Dr. Harrison was appointed not because of his PhD dissertation, not because of any personal characteristics whatsoever. He was appointed because he was the best applicant. All 21 board members agreed and appointed him. He was the best applicant. And he walked into a situation that is difficult for anybody to navigate amidst a pandemic, amidst a host of other issues. And it is regrettable that his time with us is going to be so brief. And I believe last May, when we had the meeting to appoint a personnel search committee to hire a new superintendent, the tone I took in my comments was something to the effect of being saddened and disappointed that we were losing an educational leader, in no small part due to the fact that our structure has a tendency to crush leadership under the weight of the structure. And I said then, how many superintendents do we need to go through before we learn the lesson? We've brought in an excellent educator from a different district with perspectives from North Carolina, from Watertown, and from beyond, who is active in the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, who speaks to his colleagues across the state on a regular basis. And if he is telling us this doesn't work, we need to listen. Region 9.
Any board member comment from Region 9? Let's see, Karen, and Mike, I saw your hand looking too.
Karen.
Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
I'd like to echo some of the sentiments as before. We've heard this same comment about this structure being untenable from Dr. Fossbender, Dr. McMorrin, and going on down the line. It's these people have lives other than going to meetings almost every single night till 11 or 1 o'clock. I mean, just this week alone, we have meetings every single night. And to be the superintendent, to be a principal of the school and have to get up in the morning and be at the school at 5:30 in the morning after being on a meeting till 1 o'clock at night, it just, eventually people are just not going to want to come to us for that reason. And so I think it really deserves some serious consideration that this situation has to be somehow combined one, region 9. I mean, I'm not saying, it'll be easy, but we have to do something, because it keeps, as everyone has said, it keeps coming up every single year. And it's not a particular person. It's been across the board. And with regard to Dr. Harrison, I'm very sorry also for the way he was treated. I mean, it was a continual barrage, an unending litany of complaints, FOI requests, and people who want to save money in this town might consider that the number of FOI requests is almost unsustainable for the central office staff. It's just, it wears people down after a while. The constant criticism, the constant emails, and for the people too who think that all the emails were in support of one way or the other for the DEI survey, truthfully, the majority of them were in support of the DEI survey. So, because we got many people saying, oh, they were 2-to-1 in favor of not doing it. That is not, in fact, true. Anyway, the DEI survey is done. That part is over with. I wish we could just move on to more important things. We have so many huge things on our plates right now. And if we could move off of people saying there's some sort of, I don't know, I don't even know the word for it, that there's some underlying current of trying to sneak CRT into everything. We're not. It was a survey just to gauge where we are. But anyway, that's all I have to say. Just frustrated and tired.
Thank you, Karen. Mike?
Maureen.
Can I go, or would you like?
Yeah, go ahead, Maureen. Go ahead.
I too want to thank Dr. Harrison for his work from the bottom of my heart. I do not think you, Dr. Harrison, were treated appropriately during this process. And I thank you for what you did and your commitment to the district. Secondarily, I want to thank the other board members, because I know how much work this has been, particularly for the chairs. And they have done an incredible amount of work, which has been in no sum made harder by some of what's gone on in the public and by some of the nature of the divisive comments that have been raised both on meetings and in emails. So I thank everyone who has done this work from the bottom of my heart, and I can tell you it's been a privilege to do the work with you. I have learned enormous amounts from all of you, and particularly the chairs. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike, let's see anyone else from Region 9. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. So I want to echo a lot of the comments from my fellow board members, and I agree with Maureen. I want to thank all the board members, board chairs, and Dr. Harrison for their incredibly difficult work through this incredibly challenging year. I respectfully am not in alignment with the critiques of the structure, given that we've looked at this many times and the challenges. However, I do recognize that we have to find a way to make it work, and that may be more the responsibility of the boards and how we function, rather than the structure of creating a unified district. I think we can accomplish the same goal by greater collaboration and working together. And hopefully we can make some progress in that regard. I do also want to, especially, I do want to thank Dr. Harrison for his work. And I do regret this short tenure. And again, there has never been, either, you know, when he was first hired or throughout his entire tenure, any type of an agenda to push any initiative onto our school district. The community should rest assured that the board members have the best interests of the community and the students always in our forefront. That's what we focus on. And I'm astounded that creating an educational environment where every student feels welcome is somehow perceived as being a bad thing. And I do not accept that, and I reject that. I am here as a representative for the community and for all the students. And I feel that the difficult work that we have undertaken is appropriate. And I don't feel that curriculum has been changed. I think everything is done at public meetings, open meetings with plenty of participation. And so I would, again, respectfully ask that we put aside the divisive rhetoric and come together as a community to support the work of the boards and support our children moving forward. And I do wish Dr. Harrison, you know, all the best in you know, the future. And again, I just want to thank everyone for everything that's going on this year. So thank you. Todd,
Sorry, Mary Lee, go ahead.
Needed to let Mike go first. Being newer on the board, there's a lot that I don't know. What I do know is that when we had a bunch of candidates submit applications for the superintendent of schools, Dr. Harrison was by far the best. He is a true educator. He understands what is important to help students learn. And that is what we need a superintendent for. And I will be sad to see him go.
Thank you. Anyone else, Regina? Cheryl?
I just want to say I agree with everything that my colleagues have just said in support of Dr. Harrison, in support of DEI, in support of educating our students first and foremost. That's why we're all here. That's why we're elected. And regardless of whether or not we individually agree or disagree with each other, I do believe that all of us have the commitment to deliver that education to our students. And I would ask our public and our constituents to support us in that regard as well, and work together to deliver a good, sound education to our students instead of distracting us with other things. And I look forward to working with everyone in whatever structure we so decide and whatever our communities decide to vote on. If the voters want to exert that energy to vote in a regional K through 12 structure, let's use that energy for that instead of what we're doing it for right now, which is distracting each other with political agendas that are really not important to deliver, that are not necessary to deliver sound education for our students. And thank you, Dr. Harrison. We'll miss you, and we hope to work with you in some context in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else? Region 9. All right, seeing no one else, back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, if that concludes board member comment, we will look for Jenny.
I'm sorry, I didn't exercise my right before. May I do that before the meeting concludes?
That's fine by me.
Excuse me. Dr. Harrison, I was going to wait until we had our Easton meeting, but I feel like it's more germane to the conversation right now. You mentioned on a number of occasions, on telephone and email and even in public meetings that you felt like you were a doctor, but not the right kind for this type of work. And I think that's absolutely been true and unfortunate this year. And I'm just really sorry that we are not going to get to see the benefit of the expertise that you do have in the area that we know you have the expertise in. I'm gonna say I'm not terribly, a little mad at you maybe for leaving us before we had a chance, to really, get more of that feedback from you about ways that we could improve our structure, and maybe over the next few months we can benefit from your objective comments in that regard. I think we would be remiss if as a board we didn't hear from you about your experience and really take from that and use the information to improve our system. As far as our tri-board structure, I think there are a lot of things that we can do as leaders and as board members right now and moving forward. I mean, the concept of 2 a.m. meetings is just preposterous. We can make real common sense policy change. We can implement it and say a meeting is never to go beyond a certain amount of time unless there are like certain specific parameters. We can make really thoughtful, planned ahead agenda decisions. We can not make it a practice to add special meetings. There are a lot of things that we can do as boards to align things and make this more tenable. I don't think we need to wait to totally redistrict us and collectively, group everybody together. But Heather, I will say when Dr. Harrison resigned, that was my first thought. I absolutely agree with you. Like, let's convene a group maybe that is tasked with looking at this question again, just coming to it with fresh eyes and saying, we know we've been here before, but what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What would it take? And have a real conversation about it. As far as the community goes, and I want to go back and apologize for bringing up party as far as a consideration for our superintendency, because I know that within our teams and within us as a group, that is not an issue. And, I think I have allowed the pressure of the things that are going on around us to influence it in more than it should. And for everybody on Facebook and letters and emails and mailing our photographs to people's houses, just stop it. I don't know how else to say it. Please stop and just let us do our work and let us remain committed to each other and to the kids and to moving forward in a way that isn't political, isn't controversial, and can just be about education and community. So thank you I feel like all of you tonight gave me the courage to say that. So thank you, fellow board members.
Thank you, Jenny. We'll go one more pass for anybody else who might have passed the first time around. Hearing none, we will move to adjourn. And before we do move to adjourn, I would just ask the members of the board to stay on the line after the meeting is ended for a personnel search non-meeting to have an initial discussion about a handful of things. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn from any of the boards to start. I see Mike for Region 9, seconded by Cheryl. I see Mike Hoffman for Reading, seconded by Heather. How about Easton? I see Jeff, seconded by John. All right, is there any objection to any of those motions to adjourn? Seeing no objections to the motions to adjourn, the special meeting of the 3 boards is